On Saturday nights in the 1990s, Blockbuster seemed unstoppable. A retail empire spinning late fees into nearly $1 billion and stockpiling over 8,000 VHS tapes in each store. But that same machine, built on penalties and foot traffic, proved tragically rigid when technology rewrote the rules. As Blockbuster ballooned into a giant valued at $9 billion, what invisible flaw set up its collapse? The answer lies in the incentives built deep into its core. Inside every Blockbuster store, the business ran on a simple equation: rent out as many tapes as possible, then profit from the friction when customers did not bring them back on time. Late fees were not a side note, they were a central pillar. By the year 2000, Blockbuster was pulling in an estimated $800 million annually from these penalties alone. That was about 16% of all revenue, a figure that dwarfed the contribution of snacks, memberships, or even some new releases. The economics were brutally efficient. Late fees cost almost nothing to administer. Once the point-of-sale system flagged an overdue tape, the next customer visit meant pure margin. Analysts estimate that late fees accounted for up to 70% of the company's EBITDA in some years, even though they made up just a slice of the top line. Store managers tracked late fee revenue on internal dashboards, right alongside total rentals and same-store sales. Regional leaders scrutinized which stores lagged behind on fee collection, knowing that even a modest dip could threaten their quarterly bonuses. Late fees did not just pad profits, they shaped every incentive, from how employees handled returns to how many copies of a hot new movie a store could afford to stock. The more predictable the fee income, the more aggressive Blockbuster could be about rent, payroll, and inventory. This structure created a powerful feedback loop. High fixed costs, leases, staff, and inventory meant each store needed to squeeze maximum revenue from every square foot. Per-rental margins were healthy, but the real windfall came when a tape lingered past its due date. Bonuses at every level, from the store floor to the C-suite, were tied to profit targets that quietly depended on customers slipping up. Even franchisees, who paid royalties on gross revenue, relied on late fees to cover their own fixed expenses. The company's entire reporting framework revolved around these numbers. Same-store sales growth, a favorite Wall Street metric, was only possible if late fees kept flowing. Internal forecasts for new store openings assumed a steady stream of penalty income. When analysts pressed executives about profit drivers, late fees were always in the background, never featured in the marketing, but always present in the math. For Blockbuster, late fees were not just a necessary evil. They were the hidden engine that kept the lights on, paid the rent, and justified the next wave of expansion. The model worked as long as customers kept returning, both the tapes and themselves. But as the company would soon discover, building a business on friction meant that any move to remove it was not just a customer service tweak, it was a direct hit to the core. One that would prove nearly impossible to absorb as new competitors rewrote the rules. David Cook saw opportunity where others saw chaos. In 1985, he opened the first Blockbuster in Dallas, stocking 8,000 VHS tapes and 2,000 Betamax, 10 times the inventory of a typical video store. Cook's background in software shaped every detail. He built a custom database to track rentals and returns, allowing him to keep shelves filled with the titles people actually wanted. The store's blue and yellow branding and family-friendly atmosphere set it apart. There were no adult films, no dim corners, just a bright, orderly space where parents felt comfortable letting their kids roam the aisles. Blockbuster's early success caught the eye of Wayne Huizenga, a businessman with a knack for scaling local operations into national giants. In 1987, Huizenga took control and set out to turn Blockbuster into the McDonald's of video rental. His approach was aggressive. He told teams to buy up regional chains, convert independent stores, and open new locations at a relentless pace. At the height of expansion, Blockbuster was launching a new store nearly every 24 hours. By 1988, the chain had 800 locations. Just a few years later, it had nearly 2,800 locations, stretching from American suburbs to London's West End. Scale became Blockbuster's greatest weapon.
With thousands of stores, the company secured better deals with Hollywood studios, stocking more copies of new releases than any rival. Prime real estate became standard, high-traffic corners in every city, each storefront a beacon in blue and yellow. On Friday nights, families packed the aisles, hoping to snag the latest hit before it disappeared from the shelves. But the very scale that fueled Blockbuster's rise also made it unwieldy. Each new store meant another lease, more staff, and a bigger inventory bill. Expansion targets drove the company to blanket neighborhoods, sometimes opening multiple locations within blocks of each other. The strategy was simple: dominate every market and leave no room for competition. When Blockbuster went public in 1991, Wall Street rewarded its growth with fresh capital. The 1994 sale to Viacom for $8.4 billion crowned Blockbuster as the undisputed leader in home video. Yet scale brought rigidity. Decisions filtered through layers of management, and the company's vast fixed costs demanded constant growth. What began as a nimble, data-driven operation had become a sprawling empire, one that would soon find it hard to change course as the world around it shifted.
In September 2000, 3 men from California stepped into Blockbuster's glass-walled headquarters in Dallas. Reed Hastings, Mark Randolph, and a colleague from Netflix came with a simple proposition: let Blockbuster buy their company for $50 million. At the time, Netflix was a fledgling mail-order DVD business, burning through cash and facing a brutal dot-com downturn. Blockbuster, by contrast, was a retail juggernaut, thousands of stores, billions in revenue, and a brand synonymous with home entertainment. The Netflix team, dressed in business casual, sat across from Blockbuster's CEO, John Antioco, and his top legal advisor. Hastings outlined the idea. Netflix would become Blockbuster's online arm, running the digital side under the familiar blue and yellow banner, while Blockbuster stores would keep dominating physical rentals. The proposal landed with a thud. Antioco, confident in Blockbuster's fortress of stores, dismissed the offer. He saw Netflix as a niche player, a money-losing dot-com with little relevance to the mainstream. His general counsel, Ed Stead, voiced what many in the room thought: why buy a company that looked like it would never stop burning cash? As Hastings later recalled, they were laughed out of the room. That meeting would become one of the most infamous missed deals in retail history. At the time, the logic seemed sound. Blockbuster was riding high, flush with cash from its initial public offering, and the idea that consumers would abandon the Friday night ritual for a website mailing DVDs felt far-fetched. Netflix was losing about $50 million that year, and DVD players were still a minority in American homes. The dot-com crash had made Wall Street wary of internet startups. To Blockbuster's leadership, the risk of funding a money-losing upstart outweighed any potential upside. While Blockbuster brushed off Netflix, it was making a different kind of digital bet. Earlier that summer, Blockbuster announced a 20-year exclusive partnership with Enron Broadband Services to launch a video-on-demand platform. The plan was bold. Enron would supply the streaming infrastructure and network, while Blockbuster would provide the movies and the brand. The two companies promised to bring on-demand movies to living rooms across America, slicing every rental fee 3 ways between Enron, Blockbuster, and the Hollywood studios. The deal was long-term, exclusive, and ambitious, on paper a leap into the future of home entertainment. But the Enron partnership hit turbulence almost immediately. Technical trials in cities like Seattle and Portland revealed a host of problems: slow broadband speeds, clunky set-top boxes, and a limited movie catalog. Studios hesitated to license new releases for streaming, worried about cannibalizing lucrative DVD and pay TV windows. Meanwhile, Enron's own financial troubles began to surface. By 2001, the streaming project was quietly shelved. Blockbuster terminated the deal, and Enron's collapse later that year became a scandal that rocked the business world. The 20-year vision unraveled in less than 12 months. In the span of a single year, Blockbuster had dismissed a $50 million acquisition that could have brought Netflix's technology and team in-house, while tying its digital ambitions to a partner whose promise proved hollow. The company's leadership chose the comfort of a familiar revenue-sharing model over a scrappy, customer-focused upstart. As the technology race accelerated, this pattern, betting on infrastructure over reinvention, would define Blockbuster's next chapter. By 2006, Blockbuster faced a new kind of pressure. one that did not come from across the street, but from the mailbox and the internet. Blockbuster responded with Total Access, a hybrid program that lets subscribers order DVDs online and return them at any Blockbuster store for a free in-person rental. On paper, it was a bold move. Customers could pick from a vast online catalog, skip shipping delays, and walk out with a new movie the same day. For a moment, analysts called it the best of both worlds, a service that seemed to outmatch Netflix on convenience and selection. But every Total Access envelope that landed in a mailbox carried a hidden cost. Each time a subscriber swapped a mailed disc for a free in-store rental, Blockbuster lost the chance to collect a high-margin transaction, no late fees, no impulse snack sales, no extra revenue from additional rentals. Instead of driving new foot traffic, the program cannibalized the very store economics that Blockbuster depended on. Behind the scenes, finance teams tracked the impact as store-level margins thinned, and the expected boost in online subscriptions failed to offset the lost in-store dollars. Subscription growth looked strong at first. By late 2006, Total Access had signed up millions of users, outpacing Blockbuster's earlier online efforts and even putting pressure on Netflix for the first time. But the economics were unforgiving. Each new subscriber cost more than anticipated, as heavy users churned through both mail and in-store inventory. The more successful Total Access became, the more it eroded the profit pool that Blockbuster needed to keep its thousands of stores afloat. Meanwhile, the competitive vice tightened on every side. Redbox kiosks began popping up in grocery stores and pharmacies, offering $1 overnight rentals with no membership required. Cable and satellite companies expanded their video-on-demand menus, letting viewers skip the trip altogether and watch new releases instantly from their living rooms. Studios, wary of cannibalizing their own DVD sales and pay TV deals, demanded higher licensing fees for digital and on-demand rights. Negotiating access to new releases became a costly, drawn-out process, with Blockbuster often paying more per title than it had for physical inventory. The shift from per-rental to subscription models exposed a new vulnerability in Blockbuster's business. Store leases and payroll did not shrink just because more customers were renting by mail or online. Instead, fixed costs stayed high, while revenue per transaction fell. Internal debates grew sharper. Should Blockbuster double down on Total Access and risk deeper losses, or pull back and protect the legacy store margins that still paid the bills? By 2007, the answer was already being forced by the numbers. Marketing spend for Total Access was slashed. Free in-store exchanges were limited. The once promising hybrid became a shadow of its launch just as Netflix moved into streaming and Redbox scaled its national network of kiosks. What began as a bid to outflank the competition instead compressed Blockbuster's options. Subscription cannibalization, rising licensing costs, and multi-front rivals squeezed the business from all directions. The familiar blue and yellow stores, once the backbone of the brand, now looked more like anchors than engines in a market racing toward convenience, speed, and digital delivery. Carl Icahn started buying up Blockbuster shares in 2004, convinced the company was squandering its potential and cash on risky bets. By 2005, he had gathered enough support to force a proxy fight, winning 3 seats on the board and putting management on notice. Icahn's arrival was anything but subtle. He called out Chief Executive Officer John Antiocho's compensation as excessive and publicly criticized the pursuit of unproven online ventures and failed acquisitions. His message was clear: cut spending, protect the core, and squeeze more cash from the business. Board meetings grew tense. Icahn pressed for immediate cost reductions, especially in areas that did not show quick returns. He questioned every dollar spent on Total Access and Blockbuster Online, arguing that these efforts burned through cash without delivering profits. Antiocho, who had championed the online pivot in the controversial No Late Fee campaign, found himself boxed in by directors focused on short-term cash flow. Every proposal to expand digital efforts ran up against demands to protect the bottom line and to keep the stores and their late fee revenue at the center of strategy. The pressure tactics worked. Marketing budgets for Total Access were slashed, subsidies for in-store exchanges were cut back. Initiatives that might have built a bridge to the future were throttled to preserve quarterly numbers. Antiocho's position became untenable. In 2007, after months of public and private clashes, he stepped down. Icon's preferred successor, Jim Keyes, fresh from running 7-Eleven, took the helm and quickly shifted focus back to the retail footprint. The board's new priorities were clear: defend cash flow, reduce risk, and pay down debt. Investment in online innovation slowed dramatically, just as Netflix was ramping up streaming and Redbox was multiplying kiosks across the country. The activist campaign that began as a call for discipline ended up cementing Blockbuster's dependence on its legacy model. The company's only real wedge against digital rivals was its hybrid mail and store subscription, but that wedge was sidelined in favor of protecting short-term profits. The boardroom battle may have kept creditors at bay for a while, but it left Blockbuster with fewer options as the industry's digital tide kept rising. Blockbuster's final years played out under the weight of nearly $1 billion in debt, a burden inherited from the 2004 spin-off that never truly shrank. By September 2010, the company's balance sheet showed more than $900 million owed to creditors, a mix of senior secured loans, unsecured bonds, and payables to film studios and suppliers. The stores that once symbolized Blockbuster's strength became anchors, each lease and payroll check a fixed cost that could not be escaped as rental revenue fell. The chain's main lenders, holding claims secured by everything from inventory to intellectual property, watched as quarterly earnings missed targets and covenants were breached. Interest payments stayed fixed while cash flow shrank, and every failed quarter made the terms more restrictive. Studios, once content to extend 90-day credit, began demanding cash on delivery, draining working capital and accelerating the cash crunch. As the company's liquidity dried up, executives faced a grim reality. Survival meant cutting stores, slashing staff, and squeezing every last dollar from a business model that no longer fit the market. In September 2010, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in New York. The filing froze the company's obligations, but only temporarily. To keep the lights on, Blockbuster secured emergency debtor-in-possession financing, a last resort loan that sat above all other claims and imposed a strict timeline for either a reorganization or a sale. The debtor-in-possession facility was both lifeline and countdown clock. Every dollar spent was measured, every week accounted for, with milestones that forced a rapid search for a buyer. The auction process drew interest from private equity and strategic buyers, but the capital structure left little room for a turnaround. In April 2011, Dish Network purchased Blockbuster's assets for $320 million, a fraction of the company's former value. Most remaining stores were shuttered in the months that followed, with only a handful kept open under new ownership. The sale marked the end of Blockbuster as a national brand. What began as a $9 billion empire ended in a bankruptcy court, its assets sold off to satisfy lenders who had once bet on the chain's permanence. The company's downfall was not just a story of missed digital opportunities or fierce competition. It was the slow squeeze of debt, fixed costs, and obligations that left no margin for reinvention. Today, convenience is the currency, and entire industries can vanish when they mistake dominance for durability. Streaming now generates over $100 billion annually worldwide, reshaping what and how we watch. The lesson isn't nostalgia, it is that no business is immune to disruption rooted in changing habits. In a world where platforms rise and fall overnight, adaptation isn't an option. It is survival. Share your thoughts below and join the conversation.